Welcome back, everybody. We are going to be looking at lesson 3-3 today, which is on one-step equations with fractions and decimals. So I know that most of you don't like fractions and decimals. They tend to be difficult for students. And so I'm going to show you a way that you can eliminate them altogether and not have to even worry about them. And that way it will make these a little bit easier altogether. So let's go ahead and share my screen and let's get started. Okay. Move this around a little bit. Still something. There we go. Okay, this is lesson 3-3. It is on one-step equations with fractions and decimals. You are going to need your TI-30 XS multi-view calculator for this because we're going to be using these quite a bit to help you figure out how to get rid of your fractions completely. So we are going to be using something called kill the fraction. So I know that you don't like fractions. I know that you don't like decimals. If you do like them, great, but most kids don't. So we're going to be using something called kill the fraction. We are going to use the least common denominator to eliminate all of the fractions. So this is how this works. So we are going to do something like 4/3 x equals 6. So we only have one denominator here. So that denominator is going to be what we're going to use to get rid of it. So it's the least common denominator because it's the only denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to use distributive property. We're going to multiply this whole thing by the least common denominator. So in this case, this is the only denominator. So we're going to multiply this whole thing times 3. So we have to do it to absolutely everything, just like we've talked about balance scales. If we do it to one thing, we have to do it to everything. So in our calculator, we're going to multiply 4/3 times 3, or 3 times 4/3, these two together, and we get 4. So this is going to become 4x. So we're multiplying 3 times this whole thing. We just put in these because we can't put the x in the calculator. It will just identify it as 0 because it doesn't know what x is. So you can't put the x in the calculator. So we just have to put these two numbers in, figure out what they equal. They equal 4, and then we just drop the x down. So now we can't leave the 6 alone because that would unbalance our equation. So we have to multiply the 3 times the 6. You can use your calculator for this as well as if you want. 6 times 3 is 18. And now you have an equation that no longer has fractions in it. It's the exact same equation as this. We have just changed the way it looks so that we don't have to worry about the fractions anymore. So we know that 4 and x are stuck together by multiplication. So we're going to undo them with division. So we're going to divide by 4. That becomes our big 1. 4/4 is 1. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that 1x. And whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So if we divide by 4 on this side, we have to divide by 4 on this side. And then 18/4, I'm going to plug into my calculator to see if it's going to simplify. And it does. It simplifies to 9/2. So my x is 9/2. Now we can check these, of course, our insurance policies. We can check them and make sure that they're correct. So I'm going to go back up to my original problem. So my 4/3 times x, I'm going to take out the x, replace with parentheses. I'm going to put my 9/2 which was the answer. I'm going to put it in parentheses. This should equal 6 if my answer is correct. So we're going to put 4 over 3 times 9 over 2, and it should equal 6, and it does. So because it equals 6, I know that my answer of 9 over 2 is correct. And that's killing the fraction. So let's do another example. This time we're going to put fractions on both sides. So let's do 2/5 x equals 7 over 3. So now I have fractions on both sides. So I need a least common denominator. The easiest way to find the least common denominator is to take the two denominators and multiply them together. So 3 times 5 is 15. 15 is going to be my least common denominator. So I'm going to multiply this entire thing by 15. So again, in my calculator, I'm going to do 2 over 5. That's my fraction right here. I can't put the x in because, again, it's just going to tell me it's 0 because it doesn't know what x is. So 2 over 5, and I'm going to multiply it times the 15. And that's going to give me 6. So this now drops down to 6x. Notice the x just comes down with it. So now I have to multiply the 15 times the 7 over 3. 15 times 7 over 3, and my calculator is going to give me 35. So my 2/5 x equals 7 over 3 now has been changed to 6x equals 35. This works because we didn't unbalance our problem. All we did was change the way it looks. So now we have this beautiful fraction, this beautiful equation that we can deal with. So if 6 and x are multiplied together, we undo them with division. So we're going to divide by 6, whatever we do. And there's our big 1. 6 over 6 is 1. So we have our x by itself. That's what we want, our 1x. Whatever we do to one side, then we have to do to the other side. And I'm not for sure if 35 over 6 is going to simplify. So I'm going to put it in my calculator to check. And it's the same thing, so I know that it's already simplified. So x equals 35 over 6, it doesn't change. That should be my answer. So I'm going to check it just to make sure. I want that insurance policy to make sure I'm correct. I'm going to go back to my original problem, my 2 over 5. I'm going to take out the x, replace with parentheses, equals 7 over 3. So my 35 over 6 should go in my parentheses. And I'm going to work this problem out by putting it in my calculator. So 2 over 5 times 35 over 6 should equal 7 over 3. And it does. So I know that it checks, and I know that my answer is correct. So that's how you kill the fraction. So let's find out what happens if we have a one-step equation with addition subtraction, but with a fraction. So let's do like x plus 1/3 equals 3/4. So something like this where it's addition subtraction. So again, I need a least common denominator. So 3 and 4, my least common denominator would be multiplying these together. So 3 times 4, which is 12. So I'm going to multiply this whole problem by 12. So I have to do everything by 12, all 3 terms. Keep in mind that there is an invisible 1 right here. So we have to multiply the 12 times the 1 to get 12x. Then the second one would be 12 times 1/3. So in my calculator, I would do 12 times 1/3, which gives me a 4. So plus 4. And then I have to do the last term, so 12 times 3 over 4. So 12 times 3 over 4 gives me 9. So now I have 12x plus 4 equals 9. So I'm going to subtract my 4, which gives me 12x equals 5. And then I'm going to divide my 12, which gives me x equals 5 over 12. And if I plug that in and check it, it would be correct as well. Okay, so this is one-step equations with fractions and decimals. So now let's talk about decimals. We can also kill the decimal. And the way that we kill the decimal is we are going to move all of the decimal places to the left. I'm sorry, to the right. To the right, the same number of places. If there is a whole, fill it with a 0. So move all the decimal places to the right, the same number of places. If there is a whole, fill it with a 0. So let's see what that looks like. So let's say we have 0.2x equals 4.06. So what we do is we find the maximum amount of decimal places. So this one has 1 decimal place. This one has 2 decimal places. So the maximum amount of decimal places is 2. So therefore, we are going to move the decimal place in all of these 2 places. So we're going to go 1, 2, and move the decimal place back here, which means this becomes 406. But if I move it to here, then I have to move it to here. So this becomes 1, 2, but now I have a whole. If I have a whole, fill it with a 0. So 0 to 0 just becomes 20. So this is 20x. Now that I don't have any decimals, I can simply solve. So I have 20 times x. So I'm going to divide by 20 because they're multiplied. 20 over 20 is my big 1, which gives me 1x. That's what I want. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. And since my problem was in decimals, I want my answer in decimals. So I'm going to do 406 divided by 20 instead of in fractions. If you want to do it in fractions, it's a good habit just to leave it in fractions, but then change it to decimals from there. So my answer would be 20.3. So if your answer is in decimals, I'm sorry, if your problem is in decimals, your answer should be in decimals. Let's try another one. What about 20.1 equals, I'm going to put the x on the other side this time, 4.625W. So this time I have 1 decimal place here. So 1 after the decimal here. And I have 1, 2, 3 after the decimal here. So I have 3 decimal places here, which means we use the larger decimal places, right? So the maximum number of decimal places here is 3. So we're going to move the decimal place 3 on everything. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and this becomes 4,625W. And so we've got to do it for 3 here too. So 1, 2, 3. If there's a whole, fill it with a 0. So we have 20,100 on this side. So whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So this is multiplied. So we're going to divide by 4625. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 4625. 4625 over 4625 is my big 1. So that just becomes 1W. So I have 20,100 over 4625, which gives me a really big decimal. I'm going to change that to a fraction. I'm sorry, I'm going to change it from a decimal to a fraction. And it gives me a big, long, crazy thing. So we're just going to round, I don't know, we're going to pretend that our direction said round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to say that W equals 4.3. In these types of problems, the directions will tell you what to round to. It'll say round to the 10th, round to the 100th, round to 3 decimal places, whatever. It'll specifically give you directions. So that is killing the fraction and killing the decimal, getting rid of them so that you do not have to deal with them anymore. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to let me know. I will go over some more problems with you, or we can do what we need to do to help you out. So until next time, I'll talk to you later.